Everyone, I am Lacey Carey and I am the literacy specialist over at Fritch Elementary in Carson City, Nevada. We are so excited to have you here with us today. This is Falling in Love with the Written Word, even in a digital world. And I'm here with Joanna Kaiser, who is the GATE implementation specialist here in Carson City School District. And I'm going to start out with letting her talk a little bit about herself. So Joanna, take it away.
Thank you, Lacey. Lacey and I are here and we're both so excited because we're teachers like all of you and teacher leaders like all of you. And we're hoping to put a little joy in your heart, a little skip in your step in a very difficult school year. So we're hoping to provide you some resources that will inspire you and will inspire your students. For a little bit about me, like Lacey said, I'm a TOSA in Carson City, the GATE implementation specialist. I like to think of all of us TOSAs as teachers on special assignment. We're like the James Bond, because we always are on all these special projects and doing things sometimes behind the scenes, sometimes in classrooms all around the district. I actually, as the GATE TOSA, get to work at all elementary schools, middle schools, and the high school, but mostly elementary and middle. So it's a great job. I love it. And a little background in terms of education. I got my undergrad at OSU, Oregon State University, go Beavers. My master's was at UNR, love the Wolfpack, in literacy. And I'm also a national board certified teacher in, of course, literacy, reading and language arts. I have my TESOL endorsement, my GATE endorsement. I love learning. So if there's a class, Lacey and I are normally signed up for it. So yeah, love teaching, love learning, and this is my 21st year teaching. I was in the classroom for 18 years, and this is my 3rd year out of the classroom as a TOSA. So that's a little bit about me. Take it away, Lacey.
Joanna and I actually met in a class, so that's kind of funny because I have my TESOL endorsement and my GATE endorsement too, and I think we actually met in the GATE classes. And
yes, lots of years.
We've gotten to work together kind of in different ways, but we're so excited to be here with you today. I have 10 plus years of experience in K through 6. So I've taught various grades in elementary, and I actually taught social studies in middle school for a couple of years. So that was an exciting transition for me. And now my latest career is the literacy specialist over at Fritch, as I mentioned earlier. And this year, actually, I became a math specialist too. My job got a little bigger. So that's also been a nice transition to get to do some things with math and help teachers out even more. I just love reading and I love helping teachers. And so my job is really kind of the perfect mix for me. I'm actually also a national board certified teacher. So, I do some advocacy on that end. So I'm always willing to answer questions about that or encourage people to go through that process as well. So if you want to email me later to talk about that, I'm open as well. So let's just jump in. As Joanna mentioned earlier, we are really just wanting to inspire you guys to keep reading alive in your classrooms. Even though we kind of seem to have that screen between us and our students, there's definitely some ways to kind of, keep that passion alive. So I'll let Joanna speak to this slide.
I love a good quote, and this is one of my favorites, and you'll probably be hearing that throughout our presentation. Oh, here's another quote, because I just tend to love inspiring quotes.
We both do. We both are quotey.
We are. We love the written word, quotes, taking classes. We're a fun pair. So I'm just going to read it to you because I love it. Few children learn to love books by themselves. Someone has to lure them into the wonderful world of the written word. Someone has to show them the way. I just love that because as a teacher, I was a third grade teacher for so many years, and I just really felt like my duty to every single student in my classroom was to help them fall in love with literacy. And Lacey and I, our focus of today is whether we're in a pandemic, whether we're hybrid, whether we're remote, whether we're in seat, that we want to provide some inspiration, like we said, to you and your students. And we know that this year is more difficult, absolutely. Are there more hurdles than is typical? Absolutely. But still, we are gonna give you some strategies that will absolutely make your students successful this year. And hopefully, like we said, put a smile on your face with some new ideas.
There we go. So this is my Bitmoji classroom. I've called it the Literacy Lounge. I think this is one of the ways that teachers here in 2020 have kind of made digital learning come alive. There's lots of Bitmoji action going on this year. And so of course I had to jump on the bandwagon, and then I got Joanna on the bandwagon once, once I decided. And so kind of the theme of our presentation, other than a love of literacy, is also our Bitmojis, and you will see them kind of pop into all the slides and say hi to you. So again, if you want some support with Bitmoji classrooms, I love making Bitmoji classrooms, so email me your questions. But if you kind of look around in here, we have some different things that we're going to use as resources. So we're going to watch a little video later and talk about some read alouds. Down here, I've got Dobby because I just love Harry Potter. And J.K. Rowling had this wonderful quote, again, like Joanna, I like quotes, and she said, "I do believe something very magical can happen when you read a good book." And keeping that magic alive for students is really the key here. How do we make it kind of magical? And I think Bitmoji classrooms can really kind of bring that magical element. A lot of teachers make it look like their actual classroom. I know Shauna Wooldridge is doing a session, and part of it is, you know, Bitmoji classrooms and how you can really engage students to do that, but making it look like your actual classroom is kind of fun. Kids love that. So if you guys notice, I'm gonna, you know, be kind of styled like my Bitmoji today so that we kind of look more alike. It's just kind of a fun little tool to use. We have a little engagement activity for you, and something kind of funny. So we are going to be sending out the link in the chat to a Jamboard, and what we would like you to do is take a picture, or, you know, find a picture of something that represents your year. So Joanna and I put some examples in there of our years, and I'll let Joanna explain hers first, and then I'll speak to mine.
Okay, one of the things I love about teaching and learning and being in the classroom, being a TOSA, is we're always looking for new ways of doing things. We're always looking for new resources, phoning friends like Lacey to find out what they're doing. So it's all about resources and what can we do to meet the needs of our students. This year, though, I have to say, I love a good book and I love resources, but my image represents me feeling kind of overwhelmed, laying on the ground, surrounded by books, because it kind of feels overwhelming this year. All the technology, and I have a group of middle schoolers I work with, and I actually tried Jamboard this week with them, and of course it didn't work. And so, you know, all those things where you're like, well, I hope this works today, but I'm not sure. So some days I feel like searching for resources, and just the feeling of being overwhelmed has kind of made me feel like this year might be making me feel like I need to lay down for a while, which is rare for me. For those of you who know me, I'm normally up and running around. So that kind of represents some days how I feel.
For me, I think this year has just felt like I'm sort of running around like a chicken with my head cut off, you know, or a fighter with the hose. Like there's fires everywhere. You know, I have brand new teachers. I have long-term subs because we had a lot of, you know, teachers take FMLA. And so just training people on how to use all this technology and how to use our reading program, which is huge and amazing, you know, but there's so many pieces. So I feel sort of like, you know, I'm just running in and trying to put out the fire, and I run out into the next fire. I'm not really fixing anything. I'm just trying to minimize the destruction. So that's kind of what it's felt like, I think, this year. So put your image on here of how your year has been going. Maybe yours is a little more positive than ours. Maybe yours is scary too. I don't know. And then we'll try to revisit that at the end of the presentation if we have time, and just kind of giggle. But if we don't have time, you'll at least make Joanna and I laugh. So
yeah, we'll love it.
Put something on there. All right, I am going to jump into the actual presentation, and I kind of wanted to go through some, you know, different pieces of reading instruction and how to make that not only instill a love of learning and reading into our students, but also how to kind of put the lens on our English language learners, right? That's another focus for our session today. And so guided reading is one thing that's wonderful for all of our students, but especially our English language learners. I love this quote from Harrell and Jordan. It said, guided reading is beneficial for ELs as it focuses on vocabulary development. So we know that English language learners are acquiring that language. They need as many vocabulary words as they can to kind of increase their usage. So you're going over the words in the story, right? They're clarifying words they don't understand with you in that setting. So that's great for their vocabulary. It allows for individual instruction. You can see what mistakes those students are making in their reading, or, you know, where they're struggling to tell you an answer, or they can't verbalize it, but they can, you know, draw a picture. Wherever they're at, you can kind of meet them and individualize that. And then also that verbal interaction is so important, especially for our English language learners. They have to practice the language, right? Even though they can hear it and understand maybe, or, you know, they can read it and understand, that practice, that verbal practice is so important. I know for me as a Spanish language learner, you know, that's the hardest piece, is the speaking it. I can read it okay. I can muddle through someone telling me something, but if I have to speak in Spanish, it's not pretty. Centers, book clubs, and passion projects. I just wanted to talk about video conferencing and how you could do that for guided reading, and how you could do that for centers, book clubs, and passion projects. So for guided reading, I'm so lucky to be in teachers' classrooms, and my school has just some amazing teachers, and I've seen some of the coolest stuff. I've seen some really effective guided reading in video conferencing settings. So teachers who run a, you know, guided reading group the same as they would in person, they just have those students behind the screen, because we have hybrid teachers here. So they have students a couple days and then those students are home a couple days, but we also have full remote. So I have those teachers who do guided reading strictly remotely, right? The students are on the computer and the teacher's on the computer. And there's a couple ways I've seen them do that really effectively. One is to have digital versions of the books, which are pretty readily available as part of our reading program. There's also some other resources that I'm going to share with you later if you don't have an online reading program. Another way is that those teachers just send home the books to the students, so the parents can pick those up, and then the students have the actual physical book at home to be reading. But again, it runs just like a normal guided reading. They're going through those questions they would normally ask. Those students are reading together, but the teacher's kind of honing in on one student, really listening to that student read and trying to, you know, vary the questions and instruction for what they need. So pretty easy way to use video conferencing to make that really important instructional piece still happen in your classroom. And then centers, books, clubs, and passion projects. So a lot of times we think about English language learners as like, well, I have to do interventions with them, right? And I have to like differentiate all this work, and it has to be just for them, and they need to be by themselves, or, you know, I don't need them as part of a group, like they need their thing. But ELs really need to see peer modeling too, right? They need that verbal interaction. They need to see what it looks like modeled for them. So I think breakout rooms and video conferencing is another really effective way to make sure that our ELs are hearing language and interacting with their peers. So I've seen people do centers as like a group of 2 or 3 kids, and they're just in a breakout room together and they're working on that same center. It's kind of like that old adage, ask 3 before me. Well, how do you do that in a remote room, right? You can do that with breakout rooms, because you put them in a group of 3 and they kind of work it out. And as the teacher, you pop into those breakout rooms. You can't be in all of them at once, but you can pop in and kind of make sure you're answering those questions. Book clubs, I'm gonna leave that to Joanna, because she's got some amazing book club stuff for you. But you can run book clubs on video conferencing the same way you do book clubs in your classroom. Again, you put those students in their book club in a breakout room, talking to each other, discussing whatever your prompts are, whatever task you've given them, they're kind of doing that together. And same thing with passion projects. They could all be working on an individual project, whatever they're passionate about and wanting to research, but they have another peer in there to kind of bounce ideas off or help them, right? Like I've tried looking this up 3 times and it's not working, you know, and little Johnny, who's tech savvy, is like, oh, you didn't click the right button over there, Lacey. You know, he helps out the other students. So I've seen that work really well in classrooms too. Let's see, we're gonna go on to kind of some other things to do whole group. So that's a little bit more like your guided instruction with your students, but we also know that in our classroom, that whole group instruction is really important. And I think that read alouds are something that is not only important for all students, but especially for our English language learners. So those students need to see the pictures tied to the words, right? That's going to aid their comprehension. Like when I think about learning a foreign language, I can decode and figure it out better if I have some visual clues to kind of look at and help me decode. And then we'll look at some resources for read aloud. So YouTube is a really good resource. You know, teachers, it's easy to search on there. I think most teachers know to go to YouTube for a read aloud if they're looking for something, but I did want to mention Books Alive. You can subscribe to them on YouTube and they're amazing, like all these sound effects and cool readers and voices. I was walking by a first grade classroom a couple days ago, and it was like all this thundering and lightning and this scary voice. And I'm like, what are you doing in here? Because I always love to pop in. And the teacher was like, oh, it's the, a book's alive, read aloud. And the kids were like, so tuned into the book, they didn't even notice I was in their classroom. So that's a really great one. And then Joanna actually told me about Storyline Online, which is really cool because it's all celebrities reading the stories. So on the next slide, I took just a quick screenshot of what Story Online looks like, that it's 100% free for teachers to use. Actually, anyone. I use it at home with my 6-year-old too. So you can go on there and they read you stories, and it's all really good stories that you've heard of, right? It's not just random books. It's very popular, kind of new literature and things. And they actually do read some of the stories in Spanish and English. So if you guys look, I'm going to go to the next slide. This was an example of a story where this actor reads it in Spanish, and then there's another video where he reads it in English. And I think for our students that are more proficient in Spanish, this could be really helpful, because if you hear it in your first language, then you listen to it in your second language, a lot more of that information is going to transfer, right? Your comprehension of that story is going to be higher. So I did like that. But if you want my honest opinion, I think the very best way to do a read aloud in your classroom with your students is to video yourself. And at the beginning of the year, I had so many teachers pushing back on that. Oh my gosh, if you see me on a video, like I look terrible. I couldn't possibly, I'm gonna find someone who's prettier than me, reads better than me, And now I kind of pop around to some of those teachers, and you know what they're doing? They're doing videos, because they know that they need that connection with their students, and they're only having those students here 2 days a week in person. And so they're seeing that they need that personal connection with their students. And it's really fairly easy to use. I did a Screencastify, and I had never done one before. This is my very first Screencastify that I'm about to show you, like full disclosure. It's not great, but it was my first try, and it was really easy. I used an Elmo, right, just like a document camera to show the book. And then I went ahead and put my little picture in there, and that's just a setting you click on Screencastify before you record. You hit record, it counts down 3, 2, 1, and that's it. You read the book. So I'm just gonna show you guys what that looks like. Pop back to my literacy lounge here. We'll click on this.
Hi y'all, today I'm gonna read a book for you. It's called Tiny Rabbit's Big Wish. It's by Margarita Engel, and it's illustrated by David Walker. Tiny Rabbit's Big Wish. A tiny rabbit dreamed of growing as huge as the forest, with legs as tall as trees, and eyes the size of moons. He wished for a nose as long as an elephant's trunk, and he wished for a tail as gigantic as a mountain. Tiny Rabbit wished and wished, but no matter how enormous his big wish grew, he was still tiny. So he wished some more, and while he was wishing, time passed and he grew. But he grew only a little bit.
So as you guys can see, it looks pretty good, right? The students can mostly see the books and the pictures and the words and the things you would want them to see when you're doing a read aloud. But you also have me in the corner as the teacher, right? So they get to see you and connect to you, and then also have that read aloud at the same time. So I think it's the most effective way to do that. I'm gonna click back, and I also want to talk about some differentiated instruction for our English language learners. So again, I love this quote, more quotes for you. But it says the best way for ELs to learn the same rigorous academic content as native English speakers is through differentiated instruction. So we do have to do some things different for our ELs, right? They're getting that rich experience in the classroom of hearing their peers and hearing, language modeled in a read aloud, but we also have to do some different things. And one of those is the way they're showing their knowledge, right? Sometimes our English language learners haven't gotten to the point where they can really write out their understanding of a story, or they have trouble reading the directions, or, there's a lot of language barriers that kind of get in the way of those students telling us what they know. So one way to kind of take away some of that language barrier is by using a Jamboard. And I'm going to show you guys a little example that kind of goes with the read aloud I just read. So I think I actually put a shot of it here. So I created a Jamboard for the students, and this would be like what the students would create their answer on. So I put the prompt here, please draw a picture of what Tiny Rabbit's wish was. I translated it into Spanish in case the student has a high level of, language in their first language, they could read that. But also, if you have a student who needs to hear the directions, you could also, have them play a little video that's attached to Google Classroom or something of you telling them what to do. So various ways to kind of get the directions across. But then you're having the student just draw a digital picture of what they understood about the story. So if this was an EL who drew this and I look at it, I can see that they pretty much understood, right? Even though they might not be able to write, Tiny Rabbit's wish was to be bigger. They're showing me that they understand. I can see the rabbit getting bigger. I can see that the trees are the same size as the rabbit. So you can really get quite a bit out of having them draw a picture or, digitally do a picture like this if we're in a remote setting. So I just thought that was kind of a good example of an idea you could do. And then I wanted to talk to you guys about some resources for independent reading. So it's important to do guided reading. It's important to do read alouds with students. It's important to differentiate, right? Like how we're assessing that, but it's also important just to get the kids to read. And ELs can be a struggle because many teachers believe that they should not be reading in their first language, right? Some teachers want to take away those Spanish texts, like they're learning English. They need to be reading in English, which is true. We do want them to practice English, but it does not hurt them to read in Spanish. So we want to encourage students to read in their first language and also their second language. So anything they're proficient in their first language, that knowledge transfers to their second language once they acquire enough vocabulary to express that, right? So it's fine to encourage students to read in both Spanish and English. And it's really important, and Joanna's going to go a lot more into this in her part of the presentation, but we really have to give them access to books that are culturally diverse and, more important, represent that student's experiences. So a student is not going to comprehend something that's both in a language they're learning and has a bunch of, references to things they don't understand. So we have to think about that cultural relevance and try to pick books that a student would understand and looks like their family or their country or their home, right? So really thinking about those things when you choose books is important. And I think as a teacher, I forgot that a lot, right? Thinking about those different students that I had in my class, and it's a lot to think about, but it's important for those students to help their comprehension. So where do I get these books, right? How do I find them? Public library has so many Spanish texts available, books available. I went on there and just did a quick search of Washoe County because that's my, I live in Reno, so that's my home library. But I was shocked how many Spanish texts they had, and in both languages, right? English and Spanish versions. So that's one place to go. Myon is a great resource, and it's available to all Nevada teachers and students. I just went into Myon and I actually typed in Spanish. And again, so many books came up that were in both Spanish and English. So that's another resource, if you're a remote only teacher, to get digital books for your students. This is what Myon looks like. I did just want to talk really briefly about it because I think it has some really cool pieces. When the students first log on to Myon, and a lot of you as teachers are probably already using Myon and have had your students log in, but it gives them a quick little reading level test. So it will actually tell you as the teacher what their reading level is. It also will give them book suggestions based on their student interests. So whatever they seem to like to read and click on, it starts suggesting those books, and it gives you that information as the teacher too, which I'll talk about on the next slide. The books also have a quiz attached to them to kind of check comprehension. So as a teacher, you could take a grade straight off that, right? Like if that student's read 5 books, you can see what their comprehension level is, unless they're reading books that are, well below their grade level or something. But if they were reading grade level texts, you could, look at that comprehension score. And then again, the books are available in Spanish, which is pretty neat. But I really like the reports in Myon. So if you look at this slide, it's giving you the examples of all the different reports that are available in Myon. I love that it will show you like your whole class and what the popular categories are. Like, oh my gosh, look, my class loves fantasy. Maybe I should do that as a read aloud, right? Or, oh my gosh, 60% of my class likes, nonfiction. I had no idea. They, little Billy never reads anything that's not nonfiction. Like he must really enjoy that. And then it'll tell you how long they spent reading. It'll tell you what times of day they were reading. You can learn some really interesting things about your students that way. Like, Betsy reads at 2 a.m. Betsy probably doesn't have a lot of parental guidance in the middle of the night. So, and maybe her mom wants to know that. So it kind of, as a teacher, gives you a lot of information, maybe more than you want. But another thing is that you can set goals and it will customize the reports based on your goals. So if you say something like, I want my students to be reading 3 times a week for at least 15 minutes a day, it will tell you what % of your kids are hitting that target. So, okay, 80% of your students are making that goal that you set for them, or 40% or whatever it is. So it will actually change the reports to kind of help meet your goals, which I think is pretty cool. And I think this is the end of my piece of the presentation, but I'm just double checking because I don't want to skip a slide. I didn't. Joanna's
double check.
I double checked. All right, guys, that's what I've got for you. So again, email me your questions. My email will be at the end of the presentation, and I'll let Joanna jump into her part.
Okay, so here I go. So then I go to screen share. Boom. Here we go. It's the same presentation, but it's hard to, oh wait, here I go. I got it. Oh, it's there. So I need to move this to get it in present mode. One of the things, while I'm getting this ready, one of my favorite things about Lacey is not just Lacey as a resource, because she's amazing. I work with a lot of amazing teachers, but Lacey's one of those go-to people for me, she's not just a literacy expert, or now a math expert too, because now that's part of her job description too. But technology, she's amazing with technology. Because I'm 52, I'm an older dog than Lacey. So sometimes I need someone younger in my life to show me new tricks. And Lacey is one of those people for me. She's the one that pretty much set up my Bitmoji classroom. Because my students and my own daughters, I have a freshman at UNR and a junior at Carson High. They'll be like, Mom, you're pronouncing it wrong, or whatever, Bitmoji, whatever. But Lacey's the one who got this off the runway flying, this beautiful Bitmoji classroom. And one of the things I love about it is mine, of course, like Lacey's, is all about literacy. Because literacy, no matter what I teach, literacy is always my number one love. Doesn't matter what level of students I'm working with, literacy to me is number one. That's one of the reasons Lacey and I were excited about coming here on a Saturday. That's how much we love literacy. So of course this says, and hold on, it says I'm screen sharing, but I can't see everything, but that's okay. I'm just gonna roll with it. So this is my, like Lacey calls hers, her literacy lounge. One of the things, and Lacey talked also about how our Bitmoji classrooms are kind of a reflection of our own classroom. Now I have to say my classroom did not look this cool. But my focus on this classroom is books. And I'm a huge proponent of a literacy-rich environment. And so that's kind of my section of the presentation is about, is how can we provide a literacy-rich environment for all of our students through all the resources that Lacey shared. But wait, there's more. There's more coming. So what I'm going to show you are some of my favorite resources for that literacy-rich environment. So I'm going to cruise over here to treat everyone with kindness. And here is going to be one of my favorite resources I got from a fellow teacher, kindergarten teacher in Carson. And one of the reasons I love this resource, let me pull it, nope, not advanced. Let me see if it'll let me pull up. Okay, that's weird. Oh, here it goes. It's coming. My kinder colleague, she showed me this resource and I love it because it is a book list of 100 books and it has questions that go along with the books. It has activities that go along with the books because we know that reading aloud with our kindergartners, first grade, second grade, third, all the way, no matter what age your child is, reading aloud with them is a great idea. I think I quit reading aloud with my kids probably middle school. I think it was Where the Red Fern Grows, if I remember right. But anyhow, this is a great list for families, for teachers of high interest books, and it's full of ideas. And so it kind of takes the question out of how do I read aloud or what questions can I ask, because it's all there for you. So that's your first example of how do I provide a literacy rich environment, providing parents, providing other teachers, even looking through this list on your own to see what are some books that that would be high interest for K1. That's the first, there we go. That's my first resource in my literacy rich environment. My next one, because what would a world be without books? So let me click on my little one here. Let's see, it's taking a while. Okay, this list of books is from, like, you know, I'm the Gates TOSA. So this is a list of books that our GATE teachers created, myself included, starting with our 3rd grade teachers, and it cruises through 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and it ends with some tips on helping parents choose books that are at the appropriate level for their kids. And that is why I love these resources, because this isn't something that parents don't automatically know what books to read to their kids or what questions to ask as they read. And they certainly don't know how to choose a book that's the right level for their kids. And that's one of the reasons I love the MAPS testing, because when we do MAPS, we always get such a good Lexile level on where the students are and how we want to grow them. So this is just a resource for what you can do with some for students 3rd through 8th in terms of books they have to read. They can't leave your school unless they've read all these. They just can't. The next one I'm going to share, and this goes back to what Lacey said about providing culturally relevant books. When I was at UNR, I actually did my thesis was on what impact does providing culturally relevant and bilingual books, what impact does that have on kinder families? It was actually done I did a research study. It was actually done at one of the schools in Carson. And what we found is if you provided Latino families with books that were bilingual, books that were culturally relevant, they were begging for more books. The students were begging for more books. The families were begging for more books. And their reading at home was off the charts. So drum roll, here's that list of books. My computer's slow. Okay. This shows, we called them, for the research study, it was bags of books and boxes of books. So I would go to the parent group and I would give the parents boxes of books that they could keep for the month and read at home with their kids. These were the boxes of books. And this whole list, it says Appendix B, book list for kindergarten, because this was part of my thesis. I researched on Amazon for hours where I could find culturally relevant and bilingual books. There is a wealth of resources. Just like Lacey said, you'll be shocked when you go to the library, you go online. Also at least 2 of the schools in Carson, they provided funding through their ESL department to purchase all of these books. So sometimes you can look for funding in other places, because we all know we're in a little bit of a funding crisis in Nevada. So talking with your EL designee at your schools, your principal, your vice principal, there might be a way to buy some of these books and have them in your own school libraries. Because I know in Carson City, like I said, 2 of the schools that I know purchased this whole list. It has kindergarten books and then 1st through 5th. And these are all bilingual and culturally relevant books. Because like what Lacey said, having them read books in their own language and having them read books where they are represented in the culture, it's powerful, it's research-based, and it's the right thing to do. So this is just a little resource for our bilingual families. Oh, now you get to see my OneDrive. Okay, hold on, let me go back to this. Okay, the last thing that I have on my literacy lounge, like Lacey calls it, is I have a video from Kate DiCamillo, because like I said, the whole emphasis here is providing that literacy rich environment. Kate DiCamillo is one of my favorite authors, and she's going to be talking about one of my favorite books, Charlotte's Web, because we're going to be talking next about how we can inspire students towards literacy learning by author studies and book clubs. So spoiler alert, that's what's coming next. So we're gonna watch a little bit of what Kate DiCamillo has to say about children's literature and the impact it had on her life, specifically Charlotte's Web.
Katie Camello, and I'm going to talk about Charlotte's Web in honor of it being the 60th anniversary of that wonderful book. I didn't read the book until I was an adult, and it was only because I was kind of forced into reading it by a teacher, Jane Rush Thomas, who talked about how it was a perfect example not only of storytelling, but of writing, and that anybody who wanted to write should read this book. And she said the opening line of the book a lot, which is, "Where is Papa going with that axe?" So as an animal lover, I was a little bit worried, thinking an axe, pig, there's going to be a problem here. But I read it and I fell in love with it, and I go back and reread it all the time. And I reread it as a writer, but also just as a person, because there's so much in it that shows us how to be better human beings, I think, how to love the world. And so a lot of times when I'm out and about, people will say, "What's your favorite book for children?" And I always say Charlotte's Web, but it's not my favorite book for children. It's just my favorite book for people, because I think this speaks to everybody. This book does. And E.B. White, thank you.
Okay, one of my, because we're going to talk about book club soon, one of my favorite, let me get to this, one of my favorite book clubs that we did every year in my third grade classroom was a Newbery Award winning book club. And of course, we'd always do Charlotte's Web, and we'd also do it at the same time that we were doing some of the Katie Camillo books. And what I love about what she said is we need to connect reading to writing to helping inspire students that children's literature, and also our families, children's literature is about great literature. It's not just about, oh, this is a kid's book. It's books change our lives and they help shape who we are. So we as teachers need to be careful about what books we choose, because we want the students, the parents excited, and we want them reading at home, and we want them to have a wealth of experience and enjoyment in literacy. So that's why my Literacy Lounge is all about different types of books, because as Lacey feels the same way. I mean, a literacy-rich environment is so important. Last year, Lacey and I were doing some planning together when we were supporting a teacher, and we walked into the book room where Lacey teaches, and it's just full of books. So that's what we need. We need resources for teachers, resources for our students and families, where they have access to a wide variety of books. So hopefully those book lists will help you with that. There'll be more to come later. Okay, next, author studies. We talked a little bit about Katie Camillo, talked a little bit about why I love using her books in book club, but I also love author studies for lots of different reasons. I love connecting authors as being real people and real writers. I love to connect that with journal writing. Our author studies, we try to write narratives similar to what we're reading. It's just a wonderful way to connect reading and writing. It's also a great way to differentiate. I'm just going to use Eve Bunting as an example. She has such a wide variety of books with so many different lexile levels that it's really fun to do a book study just on her books. But it's also fun to have some of your readers do a book study on Eve Bunting, some to do Kevin Hankes, some to do Cynthia Rylant, and then they can do some sort of jigsaw activity, and they can share about what they're reading about their different author. So it's really a great way to differentiate by lexile, to differentiate by interest, and book author studies. Like I said, this is my 21st year. I started author studies my first year teaching. I remember going to the Douglas County Library, because I was teaching as Douglas at the time, and checking out all the Bill Peet books and Roald Dahl and whatever book I could find, because as a new teacher, you didn't have very many resources. So author studies have been wildly successful in my classroom with my students. More Robert Munch. You can't leave elementary school without falling in love with Robert Munch books, Mem Fox books, like I talked about. Those are just a couple of my favorite authors, a few. So check out all of those authors. They have fabulous books that will engage your students and your families. I also love inspiration from real lives. So sometimes instead of an author study, I kind of do a theme, like this one would be some of our famous Latinos. We have Tomas and the Library Lady, which is about Tomas Rivera, who was from a family of migrant workers, and he became the chancellor for one of the UC schools. If you want a good cry or inspiration, read Tomas and the Library Lady. It's beautiful. The story, Sonia Sotomayor, she's written several children's books. She's one of my favorites as an example of a strong woman who has really overcome some adversity in her life, including her father dying. She's diabetic. Her mother worked 2 jobs, maybe 3, to get her into the best school she could. She went to one of the, I'm blanking on which college she went to, but her books are amazing and they're bilingual. Me llamo Gabriela. My name is Gabriela is about the first Latino who won the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature. Amazing. Harvesting Hope by Cesar Chavez. Those are just some of my favorites, but you will be amazed when you start looking into books about different cultures. You will find so many books, and I kind of talked about my middle schoolers that I'm working with. One in particular, she wants to do a project on famous Latino artists, and so I was thinking there's so many, and so as you're interacting with your students, just ask them, what are you interested in? What do you want to read about? You'll be able to find a book to meet their interests and to inspire them to be the best version of themselves. Because really, isn't that what we're here for? Okay, next. When choosing books for your classroom, and of course, we all have choices every day, but like I said, when we're representing different cultures in our classroom, it's really part of what we need to do to ensure that every student in our classroom is engaged and represented. And I just love this quote: language and culture are both essential to the development of a bilingual and bicultural identity. Jimenez found that students found literacy and language learning more appealing if their Latino identity was supported. This connection between a bilingual and bicultural identity was a common theme in the research. And I came from a Swedish background. I had both my grandparents immigrated from Sweden. And one of my favorite memories still to this day are all of our memories from childhood and beyond, with going to their house, having them speak in Swedish, celebrating Santa Lucia Day, and all these different cultural experiences that we had. And I would love reading books about the Swedish culture, the Tumten, and you know, I always have, people here call them gnomes, but in Sweden they're called tumtens. So I have tumtens in my yard, just like my grandma did. So building on that cultural identity of who we are as people is so important. Okay, next slide. Book clubs. Okay, besides having a literacy-rich environment, which of course critical, author studies, culturally relevant books, book clubs, one of my favorite things in the world, because it's a great way to ignite those sparks of literacy with every single student. Because I know, like Lacey was talking about, we're both not just teachers, but also moms. My girls could not be more different in terms of their personalities, of course, but also in terms of what books they like. Julia and I tend to like similar books. Hannah is very much into, not as much now, but as a growing reader, she loved dystopian and she loved the fantasy genre. Of course, I do not like fantasy or dystopian. They're such downers to me in so many ways. But
those are my favorite.
I know. See, Lacey, Julia loves, Hannah's the one that loves fantasy. Julia and I are historical fiction gals. Love historical fiction, but my husband loves fantasy too. So anyway, if you forced Lacey to read one of my historical fiction books, she might be like, wah, wah, you know. So no matter who we are, we need to make sure that we're providing books that are interesting to kids. So book clubs, one of my favorite ways, because you can differentiate by lexile, you can differentiate by interest. For our Newbery award-winning book club, this was one of my favorites, because we would of course do Kate DiCamillo because of Winn-Dixie. You have to read that book if you haven't read it. It's wonderful. Charlotte's Web, of course, The One and Only Ivan, and Shiloh. And one of the tricks I would use with my students too, Shiloh is part of a trilogy. Kate DiCamillo has a wealth of other books. We'd always do a Roald Dahl as well. I always tried to choose very prolific authors that had lots of other books. The I Survived books were huge in my classroom. They loved those. Because if you read one I Survived, you really should read the 10 other I Survived. If you've read one Kate DiCamillo, you probably should read a bunch of others. So I would always try to choose books that had lots of variety in terms of interest, in terms of lexile, but that also were by authors where the kids would want to keep reading them. And of course we have a great, Lacey and I, you know, we love good quotes and good research. And I love this one, ELs benefit from the opportunity to use language in authentic contexts. And book clubs, such an authentic way to ensure that students are accessing literacy, because a lot of what we would do with book clubs was part of homework that sounds kind of negative, like, oh no, I have to do homework. But the students loved it because they were reading books that they got to choose. They were reading books at their level. They were reading books that were important to them. And then we would start our day, as soon as we started our literacy block, they would be talking about what they had read the night before. That is also very good for positive peer pressure, because they didn't want to come in and not have read the night before, because then that's embarrassing. So make sure, and part of what I feel as a teacher, we don't want to ever say, well, they're not going to read at home. Well, we have to make sure they're reading at home. And book clubs is one of those ways you can do this. And a lot of the ideas I'm talking about are with real books, but I know our librarian in Carson City, our district librarian, she got the latest and greatest research on what was safe for lending books out. So basically we're told that students can take books if they're like in a baggie, and if that we don't let someone else touch the book till 3 days after they come back in. So anyhow, if you check with your district librarian or your school librarian, you might have some wiggle room on sending books home, because I know we've been allowed to do that here with very specific directions on, of course, student safety first. This, again, I love research. This isn't, like I said, the quotes and research, but I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I probably should. But one year for Christmas, I actually asked for this book. It was when I was getting my master's, Handbook of Reading Research. I seriously did. I even wrapped it for myself and put it under the tree. It was full of great research, but this was one of my important ahas. By 4th grade, Guthrie, important educational researcher, found that students reading at grade level engaged in an average of 60 minutes per day of reading during free time and homework, and another 60 minutes per day during teacher-guided instruction. So if we want our students on grade level, they have to be reading 60 minutes during our school day and 60 minutes at home. And for a lot of teachers, that seems like a mountain that is just not going to be possible to climb. And I've heard that a lot at the schools where I've taught. But what I did for that reading at home is I instituted book clubs, author studies, and every time I met with parents, we talked about the expectations. Parents always knew what we were doing, and it really became a joy, and it was rare for students not to do that reading at home because I provided the books. They got to choose the books, and there was accountability built in every day. And so don't listen to teachers who say they're not going to read at home. They will. They will. And the other thing, and to me, this is a cautionary tale, the students who aren't reading at home, right here, it says 4th grade readers at the 2nd grade level engaged in 10 minutes per day of reading during free time and homework and spent only 20 minutes in teacher-guided instruction. And so we as teachers really need to be providing lots of time where students are actually doing real reading. Okay, now I told you that more book lists would be coming. So if I click on this book, let's see if it'll work. let's see. Okay, this is guess what? Another list of books, 2nd and 3rd grade book list, of course, created by me. And this has more, it's another list of books that I've been using for book clubs. The Horrible Harry books, the Ivy and Bean books, the Stink books. You got to read the Stink books. They're hysterical. Magic Treehouse, Kim Jansen, of course, 1st and 2nd grade, Arthur, Henry and Mudge, Frog and Toad, Amelia Bedelia, of course. And then for those of us who like Lacey was talking about, there's a lot of nonfiction readers out there, kids that just want to read nonfiction. I have some of that too. So anyway, I'm like the book lady in terms of book lists. So here we go. Next slide. Here are some resources for you. And you are going to have these resources available for you because, of course, you're going to have access to our presentation. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going over every resource. But these are resources that I used when I did book clubs. If you are familiar with Kylie Beers and her Notice and Note books, they're amazing. I have them right here. But she has so many ideas in her books. And Notice and Note is something that I did when we did book clubs, just to get kids used to being engaged in reading and kind of paying attention to what they're reading. So I have here, this is an example of what I would send home, because this was a real partnership with families. I wanted the families to know, I wanted the students to know exactly what the expectations were. So this is our I Survive book club with the I Survive books. But down here, I have step by step. They need to be reading 25 to 30 minutes. They're going to be doing a Notice and Note every night. They're going to be writing a summary. And then they got to be ready for their book talk. They're going to be talking about the plot. I mean, I would have it very specific. And whenever I met with parents, guess what we would always talk about? Books and where we were going next with our book clubs. And parents loved our book clubs. I never had a complaint. They loved it. Okay, here on this one, this has a lot of Notice and Note posters that you could use in your own classroom. So Notice and Note posters, if you want to check that out. And I'm going a little faster so Lacey and I are done on time, because we could talk to you forever. This one are signposts, of course, that's from Notice and Note. And here, I'm just going to click on this. One of my favorite resources, I use that word all the time, but I love Learn Zillion. And we talk about plot a lot, obviously. Plot when we write, plot when we read. And I love the analysis of a story mountain in Learn Zillion. So I added that as a resource in case you need one. And then, Lacey, I think we did it. How are we on time?
We are good.
Good. So we're ending with Stronger Together because, like I've said throughout, if it wasn't for teachers like Lacey, I would never have become the teacher I am now. And I hope that you have people in your life that you can reach out to and that can be a soft spot to fall, like Lacey is for me, and also someone that inspires me to be the best teacher I can be, really the best human. Lacey, you're the real deal. So we have our emails there, and we're happy to help you in any way we can.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending your Saturday with us. Joanna said it well. You know, we're impressed that you guys want to do these professional development opportunities, even though it's your weekend, especially in 2020 with everything we have getting thrown at us. But we really do want your questions. We will help you. We will find answers. That's our favorite part of our job, I think, both Joanna and I, is feeling like we really are helping teachers. So reach out to us if you'd like a resource or you just had a question about the presentation that you weren't able to ask in the live chat. So yeah.
And I will find a resource for you, and Lacey will put out your fire. We're here for you.
Got it handled. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.